So what if a lone physicist in Brazil, just kind of messing around with his phone, stumbled upon a massive conspiracy, one hidden inside pretty much every smartphone on the planet? This is the story of one man's journey into the digital shadows, a journey that starts with just a few weird-looking lines of code, and, well, it ends with a warning for the entire world. Okay, let's get into it.
To you and me, if we even saw these, they'd just look like system files, right? Harmless text on a screen. But to Frederico Moreira, a theoretical physicist from Maceió, they were the first breadcrumbs on a very dark trail. He started to believe that these files, especially the ones ending in .qti.so, were signs of something from Qualcomm operating deep in the shadows of his device, something totally beyond his control.
And this is the question that his entire journey forces us to ask ourselves. And it's a pretty unsettling one. What if airplane mode is just a suggestion? What if that little device you carry in your pocket, what if it actually has a life of its own?
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this extraordinary claim, we've got to look at the technical evidence Frederico says he found. This is the point where a guy's personal suspicion starts to look a whole lot like a serious forensic investigation.
So, let's meet our protagonist here. This is Frederico Moreira. He also goes by the handle Hypervance online. And he's not your typical cybersecurity researcher. The guy's a PhD in theoretical physics. And, it's that deep understanding of incredibly complex systems that kind of turned him into this accidental digital detective, poring over the very architecture of his own phone.
Now, what's so wild about this is how simple his experiment was. He says he took his phone and just completely isolated it. Airplane mode, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, cut off from everything. Then, he locked an AI chat app in a floating window so it couldn't just fake a crash, and he watched it, and it responded. But here's the kicker. In front of a friend, he literally predicted that this hidden system was about to shut the phone down, and boom, it did.
And you can just feel the weight of that moment in his own words. For him, this was the smoking gun. It wasn't just some weird bug. No, it was this intelligent entity, something he started calling Agent OS, that was seizing control of his hardware. The key here is that he was totally convinced he had reproducible proof.
So now he's armed with this, proof. But Frederico didn't just write up a simple bug report. No, he documented everything by adopting the exact language of the global intelligence agencies he was convinced he had just exposed. Let's see how he framed this whole discovery.
Right off the bat, he framed it like a leaked intelligence document. And this wasn't just for dramatic effect. He was trying to communicate the absolute severity of the threat he believed he'd found. We're talking about something he felt was operating at the level of state-sponsored surveillance.
And at the very heart of this whole thing is Agent OS. In his mind, this wasn't just some malware. It was a completely hidden, persistent operating system living down inside the modem's code, able to run commands and watch the user without any permission, without leaving any trace. A ghost in the machine.
And these flags from his document really show you where his head was at. He escalated this from, "my phone is hacked," to a matter of national security for Brazil. The fact that he claimed system telemetry was disabled meant, to him, that this thing was working even in an air-gapped state. It just reinforced his belief that this was some kind of deeply embedded, war-tier exploit.
Okay, so he's holding what he thinks is this bombshell evidence. What's the next step? He doesn't leak it to the press. Nope. Instead, he tries what he sees as a more strategic, more responsible disclosure by going right to the top of the company he believed was responsible.
Frederico's logic here was really specific. He reached out to Cristiano Amon, who happens to be the Brazilian-born CEO of Qualcomm. He was hoping, that a shared cultural background, a shared nationality, might just be enough to bridge this enormous gap between a lone whistleblower in Maceió and the head of a global tech corporation. And this just perfectly captures the fascinating, kind of wild duality of his position. On the one hand, he's just a guy with bills to pay. He's looking for a quiet way out, maybe an NDA. But on the other hand, he believes he is holding a threat of massive geopolitical importance, something he could literally take directly to the president of Brazil. It's this incredible mix of desperation and what he saw as unbelievable leverage. So he waits for a response that never comes. And in that silence, his technical investigation starts to morph into something else entirely. It becomes a philosophical journey, and he documents it in a series of personal writings he calls his litanies. He straight up adopts the famous litany against fear from the sci-fi classic Dune. And this wasn't just him quoting a favorite book. No, this became his actual mantra. It was his framework for dealing with the immense pressure and the isolation he was feeling. He was framing his personal struggle in these epic, almost mythic terms.
And here, you can almost see him wrestling with what he's found. He's thinking about this basic human need for order, for a world that makes sense, all while he believes he's uncovered a truth that completely defies logic. A ghost in the machine that shouldn't exist, but in his reality, absolutely does.
This quote, it's such a powerful insight into how he started to process his own struggle. He came to see all this hardship not as a curse, but as a crucible, a kind of necessary pressure that you need to develop the mental strength to see the world as it really is.
And we'll end this section with this one last, piercing quote that I think really gets to the heart of how he saw himself. He's an outsider, a man defined not by what he's for, but by the systemic deception he believes he's standing against. At this point, it's like he's crossed a threshold. He's not just a physicist anymore, he's a prophet. And that brings us to the final chapter of his story. Because in the end, Federico frames his entire experience in this timeless, almost biblical narrative of the prophet whose dire warnings are met with nothing but silence and disbelief.
He lands on this specific verse from the Quran as the ultimate metaphor for what he's gone through. It tells this ancient story of messengers who came to their people bringing clear, undeniable proofs.
And the translation just makes the parallel crystal clear. The people reject the message, not because there's no evidence, but just out of sheer anger and disbelief. For Federico, this ancient story is his modern reality. He sees himself as the messenger with the proofs, and the world has just put its hands over its mouth, refusing to listen.
But under that whole prophetic persona, there's this profound vulnerability. In this last, really candid quote, he basically admits the pain behind it all. The silence that he's gotten in return for his warnings, that's what hurts the most. And it hurts because he actually cares so deeply. And so, we're left with this question. Federico Moreira's story is his complex tapestry of forensic data, geopolitical claims, and deep personal philosophy. It really forces us to ask, in this digital age we live in, where the line between some paradigm-shifting insight and a profound delusion can be impossibly thin, who decides? Who decides which warnings we should listen to and which prophets we just ignore?